share my screen. And while we're waiting, I will bring up the exercises as well, like that. And I will go on to the pi of pi section, like so, and make that a little bit bigger. So what do we need to do here then? Well, I first of all need to select my data, and I'll go to Insert. I will choose the type of pie chart that is the pi of pi, like that. And I need to add on percentages, so I'll do that by once again choosing my style 11, like so. Now, I need to adjust what appears on this second pie, and I do that through the Format pane. So to bring up the Format pane, I can either double click on my chart, or I can go to the Format menu and choose Format pane, like that. Then I need to click on my data series, so I just click on one of the pie slices, like so, to highlight the lot. Next, I go into the options for that. And the thing that I'm interested in is where it says split series by. Instead of splitting series by position, I need to split it by value, because on my second pie chart, I need to display values that are less than 300. So I'll put 300 in there, like so. So when I do that, and we take a look at the chart, we can see that the second pie chart has got the values for tea and for cake in there. And we can see that we've got the total percentage for those of 17%. Right, so let me minimise the exercises and go back over to the demos. Before I move on to the next sort of chart elements, I've got a very observant question in the Q&A. Why does a negative coffee not show as a negative percentage? Yeah, that's a really good question. If we look at the values that we've got here for our pi of pi, I've got coffee there of minus 65. And we can see that the pi of pi chart thinks that is 6%, not a minus 6%. So we can see that that is perhaps a little bit of a gremlin when it comes to the pi of pi chart. If I turn this back to being 65 though, like that, then all becomes accurate again, like so. So that's just going to be something else to watch out for when you are using charts, and another bit of a gotcha when it comes to those pesky negative values. Now, let's see. I think the next thing that we need to look at will be relating to the axes, and there are a few different things that we can do here. Can you remember that when we were looking at our scatter charts, we saw that it was a little bit difficult to understand what was going on here because Excel hadn't put on any axis titles for us. Well, we can add these by adding them on ourselves. So we go to Chart Design, Add Chart Element, we go to Axis Titles, and we add on a primary horizontal one and also a primary vertical one, like this. So now we have got them appearing on our chart. Unfortunately, when you add on your axis titles, it doesn't actually fill it in for you as to what each one represents. So you have to do that yourself. Now, we knew from before that the axis going along the bottom, the horizontal one, that related to hot drinks. So I'll double click in the text and I'll put hot drinks there. Then I'll go over to my vertical title here, and that one will be cold drinks, if I can spell, like that. So that's something that you can do to help make your scatter charts a little bit more readable. Put those axis titles on. Now, Other things that we can do relate to the axes themselves. If I click on the horizontal axis here, we can see that it's going from 0 up to 7,000. And let me just make that a little bit bigger to make it more visible for you. What I could do is actually change that so that it goes up to 6,000 instead. And to do that, I go into my axis options, I open that up, and I look in the bounds, because these control where your axis begins and ends. So we've got a minimum bound of 0. Our maximum bound is currently 7,000, but let me put 6,000 in there instead, so that we get our chart looking like that. And I can do a similar thing to the vertical one as well. I can make that one have a maximum bound of 8,000, like so. Right, what else have we got then? Well, another thing to notice about these axes is that we have got lines that appear next to the numbers that appear on the axis themselves. Now, there are a couple of things that control this. First of all, the grid lines are another chart element, and you can add them if they're not already there by going up to Chart Design, Add Chart Element, into Grid Lines, and then choosing your major grid lines there. And we can see that those are currently selected. If you want to control where these appear, so where the numbers appear on your axis, these come from the units, so the major units in your axis. At the moment, that's set to 1,000, so we get numbers appearing every 1,000. But if I wanted to use that to 500, the axis would change to that instead, so they would appear every 500 like that. Now, the major grid lines are pretty useful because they can help you read data off a chart. You've also got minor grid lines as well that can just help to fine-tune that. And if I add those, I'm going up to Add Chart Element, Grid Lines, and Primary Minor Vertical Grid Lines like that. It's very, very faint, but we've actually got little tiny lines appearing in between those major grid lines. You control where they appear by going into the minor units. That will control the distance apart that those will appear. So if you wanted more minor grid lines, just shrink that minor units number there. Now, other things that we have got is the ability to change where the axes appear relative to one another, so where they cross. If we wanted to move our axis, for instance, we could go into where it says vertical axis crosses, change it from automatic to maximum, and our axis will move like so. So you can play about with its placement. Now, let's see what else we've got. I think what I'll do at this point, can you remember when we were looking at line charts, and I was saying that by default, they can be perhaps a little bit tricky to read because you get your dates on your line chart appearing in between those tick marks, but actually you might want them to appear on the tick marks. Well, you control this using the axis. If I click on the axis and go into its properties and go into axis options like this, then if I scroll down, you'll notice that there is something called axis position. At the moment, it's set to between tick marks, but what I can do is select on tick marks instead. And if I do that, the chart changes like so. So we've now got 1st of January appearing on that tick mark, making it a little bit easier to read what's on the chart. One final thing that I will mention relating to these axes. Let me go into this data here. Here we've got some sales dates, and we've got 1st of January, 2nd of January, 3rd of January, 1st of February, 1st of March, 1st of April. So we've basically got dates that are spread unevenly. Now, if I wanted to create a column chart for this, I could go to Insert and choose a column that looks like this. Now, when I do that, notice that we have got columns that appear really, really thinly, don't they? The reason for that is Excel has recognised that the first column relates to dates, and so it's organised its horizontal axis and spread them out as dates. If you wanted to change this, click on the axis, go up to your options, open up your axis options, and then look at the axis type. At the moment, it's automatically detecting that they're dates, but if you change it to text instead, then you will get this effect. So you're effectively getting the dates to be treated as text instead of dates, and that may be useful to you under some circumstances. I think with that, though, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and go back over to the slides so that we can just review some of that. So first of all then, the axis title. As we've seen, we can add on horizontal and also vertical axis titles. There's also grid lines that you can add. There are vertical and horizontal grid lines, and there are also major and minor ones. The big difference is that the major grid lines have got labels for their values and the minor grid lines don't. Then we've got the axes themselves, and for these you can do things like set bounds, you can set the units, you can control where the axes cross, and you can also control the type to an extent as well, so whether it is text or date. So I think that we should have an exercise on modifying the axes. We've got some planet data shown there where we have got distance of planets from the sun and their orbit. What I'd like to do is create a scatter chart that's based on that data, and I'd like to change both of the axes so that the minimum bound is 0 and the maximum bound is 700. I'd like to know how many data points are displayed in that scatter chart, and also what can you tell me about the relationship between distance and orbit? Do they increase together? Does one increase and the other one decrease? What sort of thing is going on that you can tell from that scatter chart? So try that out. When you've got answers, please drop them into the chat. I'll switch my mic off for another 3 or 4 minutes or so, and I'll come back after that time with the solution.